Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the California Clays podcast. I'm your host, Henning Matthew. Today's guest is someone whose work is changing the way top shooters see the game, literally. Dr. Ed Lyons is a renowned sports vision consultant who works with elite athletes across a range of disciplines, including some of the best clay shooters in the world. With a background in optometry and a deep understanding of eye performance under pressure, Ed helps shooters unlock visual skills most of us didn't even know could be trained. We'll dive into what makes elite shooters visually different from the rest, explore some of the most common myths around eye dominance and target focus, and hear how vision training can be a game changer in your shooting career. Whether you're a weekend warrior or a serious competitor, get ready to learn how your eyes might be the most underdeveloped part of your game. This is going to be a fun and fascinating conversation, so let's get into it with Dr. Ed Lyons. Ed Lyons, thank you for joining me on the California Clays podcast.
You're very welcome. Pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited to have you on here because this is a topic that I've recently kind of been exploring, and it's sports vision. And I know you're one of the world's, renowned experts about sport vision. And I really wanted to dive into this because I know a lot of shooters at some point will get to a stage where sports vision becomes more and more of a focus for them in their training and their path to improvement. But before we dive into the nuts and bolts of all this stuff, can we get a little bit of a background on you? I know you, but for the audience, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I qualified as an optometrist in the UK in 2001, and I'd always been really interested in sport as a kid and through university, and I'd always had pretty poor eyesight. So I'd been going to the optometrist since I was 4 years old, and I now own the practice that I went to all of those years ago.
Oh, you're kidding. That's too
Yeah.
funny.
And in 2005, 2006, I was really looking for a way in which to kind of differentiate the business and try and find a niche speciality that I personally would find kind of rewarding to get interested in from an academic perspective, but something that could open a niche and a doorway to gaining other clients. And I found a diploma that was being offered in sports vision. I talked to my partners at the time, my sort of co-directors, who said, that sounds like a waste of time. It's too expensive. No one's going to come. If you want to do it, pay for it yourself. So it was the best part of $6,000-7,000. So I thought, yeah, I'll do it myself. And, nearly 20 years later, we've had people from 52 countries around the world now visit my little practice in a small town in the middle of the UK. And we've worked with, Olympic level athletes in gymnastics and Premier League football and rugby and boxing and pickleball and tennis, and with special forces people and a myriad of different things. 90% probably of my clinical time now is working with competitive shooters, clay and game, and it's mainly the sort of recreational to competitive clay shooter that is my kind of day-to-day work these days. And
Yeah.
each day, each time I meet a new client, I learn something new, or I get asked a question that makes me think and makes me try and do some more research to find out a little bit more than I knew yesterday. So it's a field that's kind of constantly evolving and is still making me as excited and interested today as it was, nearly 20 years ago when I started.
No, that's great. So you're an optometrist,
Yep.
not an ophthalmologist. And can you tell maybe the little bit of the difference between the two?
Yeah, so essentially, the optometrists like me are not clever enough to be ophthalmologists. So the ophthalmologists are the guys that do the surgery. So
Oh, got
the
it. Okay.
optometrists like myself are more into the mechanics of the eye, the refractive work, the binocular vision aspects, the specialist contact lenses, the product, and the some of the neuro-optometry, the eye-brain training work. Whereas the ophthalmologists are the clever guys that sort out the ophthalmic disease process and that sort of thing.
Interesting. Okay. So in terms of the differences, you're more helping folks develop their eye ability and then also giving them the tools to see better, where the ophthalmologists are more focused on resolving disease and issues and, correction from a, more surgical level.
Absolutely. So I'll have a team of ophthalmologists that we have, which I will refer my clients to. So if I find a client that comes to me with a problem and we detect that it's pathological, I can then make sure that that person sees the best ophthalmologist in that particular field, whether it's corneal, whether it's vitreoretinal, whether it's optic nerve, whether it's extraocular muscle, all of these different subspecialties of ophthalmology. We can then make sure that person sees the best person in the field to get the best outcome. Yeah.
You mentioned that you've worked with a lot of different types of athletes and some of the best athletes in the world and what they do. How do you approach customizing your recommendation for each sport and each type of athlete?
So all of my consultations take a minimum of 2 hours, and we make a whole series of tests and assessments, lots of which are in a normal, what we call a traditional eye examination, but then a whole series are more in depth from a binocular vision perspective, working on depth perception, reaction time, tracking, contrast sensitivity, hand-eye coordination, eye dominance, of course, and a myriad of different things. And probably 7 or 8 years ago, I invested in a new piece of kit, which has kind of transformed my sports vision practice, and that's with Synaptic, who are an American company.
I'm
And that
familiar. So the
uses
glasses that I
yeah,
don't
so
say.
they do. Yeah, they do this the strobe glasses and vision training apps. But one of the coolest things is what's called a sports vision station. So that helps me to analyze 10 key visual skills of that person and anonymously compare them against their peer group. So we get graphical data, and the data pool is refreshed and optimized every time a new person anywhere in the world goes on the station. So we can assess how good different aspects of that person's vision are compared to the people against whom they'll be competing. So, for example, if we've got a Formula One racing car driver, we can then measure their reaction time and compare it against all the other F1 drivers that have been through the system. We
Oh,
can
wow.
then measure their reaction time against somebody who's a weekend racer, that kind of thing. And so we can see where those people fall. So essentially, the point is to analyze which aspect of a person's vision is good and normal, which bits are better than good, but crucially identify the areas which are ripe for optimization.
So that's
Um,
interesting. So is that something that is available to everybody? Is it, cost prohibitive maybe for some folks to go through, or
um,
can anyone really do this?
yeah, I think it's cost prohibitive from the clinic purchasing the assessment equipment, because that's quite expensive. But it kind of depends on how much that person wants to improve.
Got it.
And a lot of the stuff that I do in practice is what I would call normal high grade optometry. And that's why the consultations take so long. And the biggest thing I've learned is how to listen and how to research the visual needs of that athlete before I see them. So it was part of my journey into competitive clay shooting myself. Was I was started to get clay shooters who came in. I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't know what FitAsk was. I didn't know
Oh,
what a battery
interesting.
was.
Okay, so
I
you
didn't
weren't
know
a
what
shooter before that.
no, absolutely not. And I just thought, I'm failing my clients if I can't communicate on their level and I can't understand what Olympic trap is and why somebody might need really fast target acquisition, that I don't understand the difference or the need for high contrast sensitivity when shooting a 70 mil target against a particularly difficult background. And if I didn't understand what they needed, I was unable to deliver the solution.
Right.
So that took me into my shooting journey to go and shoot every single play discipline I could, so I could understand what a client may need when they come to see me.
Interesting. So what did you start off with?
I started off with DTL down the line, which is like ATA, because that was essentially the learning the mechanics of gun mount and target acquisition and essentially where the wooden bit of the gun goes. Then moving on to skeet, then moving on to sporting, and essentially going through everything from that perspective.
Mhm.
And yeah, it just got really addictive and really expensive and became a bit of a problem, but one that was very enjoyable. Yeah.
So going through that process yourself, how did you use, your, knowledge in how you shot, if that makes sense?
Well, one of the big kind of light bulb moments for me was we were exhibiting at a country fair. So I decided that I'd take my practice externally and we'd go to an event which had people who hunted, they shot, they fished, they were in that sort of country pursuits sport. And I had a guy who came to see me who'd shot for England and GB for a while and was struggling with certain aspects of his vision and shooting Olympic trap and shooting well.
Mhm.
I always felt he could shoot a bit better. And the first thing that sprang to mind when I saw him was that his contact lenses were absolutely awful. So he was wearing really, really old tech contact lenses that were getting dirty, they weren't hydrated, they weren't letting oxygen through. So they performed really well on day one. And by day 28, 29, and 30, the performance of those lenses was really poor.
Hmm.
And it was just amazing to me that nobody had picked this up before. So the big transformational thing for him was to move him into far better performing, daily disposable, high quality optical contact lenses. And all of a sudden, he had a massive transformation in his performance. And that was one of the gateway things for me, was that sometimes the simple solutions are the things that are most transformative. And
Right.
if people don't know what else is out there, they just stick with what they've got. Again, recently we had a fantastic result in the Olympics with Bryony Page, who is a trampoline gymnast, and she won her first Olympic gold medal. And I've been working with her for a couple of years. And again, she was struggling with spatial awareness. She was struggling with her timing. She was getting what we call the twisties, getting lost in a skill because not knowing where she was in space. And we did some neuro-optometry, we did some sports vision training with her. But again, one of the main things was getting her into some specialist contact lenses that gave her more stable, precise vision.
Mhm.
Because the visual needs of an athlete, particularly somebody who's in the elite aspect, their visual needs are so much greater than a lay person. And sometimes when you, particularly over here, if you go for a high street eye exam, it can be a 15 to 20-minute assessment. Can you see a number plate? Can you see your computer screen? That's good enough.
Right, right.
These athletes, good enough is not good enough. We want to try and make their visual perception to be as good as it possibly can be. And then it's my job to try and find how we get there.
I mean, isn't it true that everything is really in your eyes when it comes to being an athlete? I came to realize I haven't worn glasses my whole life, and
Mm-hmm.
actually, it was a more recent endeavor for me. And when I started getting into clay shooting about 11, 12 years ago, I thought I had really good eyesight,
Uh-huh.
and I had good hand-eye coordination. I played sports. I
Yeah.
could see clearly, and then I had a moment where someone had mentioned to me that I should get my eyes checked if this is something that I'm looking to do more seriously in clay shooting. We're using our eyes so much. A lot of what we do is all in the eyes. So I did, and I ended up finding out that I had astigmatism. I've told this story before in podcasts, so forgive the audience if they've heard this over and over again. But my biggest lesson learned there was I did not realize I needed correction until I went in to get my eyes checked. And then when
Mm-hmm.
I did and found out that I had astigmatism and I had it corrected, I didn't realize what I was missing, in
Yeah.
terms of clarity, in terms of vision at distance, in
Uh-huh.
terms of a number of things. And I literally, I like to attribute it that I corrected my eyes and that's why I improved. But I went from A class to master class, relatively speaking, quickly for me,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I was just able to see the target so much better.
Yeah.
And so, what's your recommendation around that? I mean, obviously, clay shooters, but everybody probably should get their eyes checked. But how often do you recommend people to come in and get that checked?
I think generally the sort of guidance in the UK is that everybody should have a good quality eye examination every 2 years.
Right. Oh,
If
two
you
years. Okay.
Yeah. If you've got somebody who's an athlete or you've got somebody with a positive family history of an eye problem, then every year, so every 12 months is pretty much where it should be. Because, sometimes these little visual changes can be so chronic and slow to happen that it's 0.01% worse than the day before. So you actually don't notice that things are deteriorating. And, I always say that perfect eyes don't make the perfect shooter. But all the elite shooters that I've worked with and do work with now have got better visual skills than
Right.
normal people. And as we said, it's my job to try and extract as much of that visual potential out of that person as possible because, it improves target acquisition. It improves reaction time, their ability to read targets for speed and distance and trajectory and all these different things. And when the difference between getting into a shoot off can be one target out of 200, this makes a difference.
Right.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, a lot of what I think folks think about is that their mechanics, or they don't blame their mechanics first, they blame their eyes over things. What would you say is the most misunderstood aspect of how the eyes functions while shooting clay sports?
That's a really, really good question. So I would say that having your visual system optimized is crucial,
Mhm.
but sometimes you'll get people who will inaccurately attribute a miss of a target down to their vision when it's actually a non-trivial technical issue. And that's why over the few years that I've been doing this, I've also started to work with coaches, because I'll get somebody who may have been having lessons for a period of time and has sort of always plateaued at C or B class, and they'll think they've got an eye issue. And we can go through this assessment process and show them that in this particular case, they don't. Their visual system is good, but they actually need to have a more refined technique. And I can then potentially refer those people to a coach that is going to be perhaps the next level to get them to where they need to be. So all of the stuff that we do is based on data that's measurable rather than a guess or a hypothesis or a supposition. So we make decisions based on fact rather than just something that we pluck out of the air. And sometimes the stuff that I have to say to clients isn't what they want to hear. So
Right.
people will come to me wanting the magic glasses or the magic contacts or the magic new lens to make them shoot 100 straight. And we can say, look, actually, things are pretty good. You need to work on your technique.
Mhm.
Or we can say that, yes, you've got a binocular vision problem. You've got an eye muscle issue. You need to work on your reaction time. You need to optimize your visual technique, things like quiet eye, which I think you talked about before. You're not using your eyes effectively. And then I can potentially give them the tools to work on those weak areas. But sometimes people don't want to do the work. They just
Right.
want to come in and get the thing. And
Right.
they just want the thing to do the work for them without actually
Sure.
putting the time aside to actually go and work through these problems.
Can you touch on the quiet eye concept for folks?
Yeah.
What This is a really important thing that's come up in sports vision, and many sports vision doctors talk about this. What is quiet eye?
So quiet eye is the final duration of the fixation on a target prior to the initiation of the movement phase. And what that basically means is having really good controlled still eyes. This is where people talking about having laser focus on the clay. That's something I hear a lot. That is correct. You need to make sure that your visual system is controlled on that target, because that gives a lot more control. So I think it was Causer and Bennett in 2010, they did a study on, I think it was on skeet shooters, and they found that the elite shooters had a longer duration of quiet eye, which is a measurable timing of fixation on the target. And what was really interesting is they had much slower gun speed.
Hmm. Hmm.
So there was a positive correlation between long quiet eye duration and slower gun speed with elite performance, and poor quiet eye, erratic vision, and faster gun speed. That was more attributed to poorer performance. So it's
So,
all about control.
if I can ask a clarifying question, because I'm glad I asked this because now I misunderstood what quiet eye was.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a coach early in my shooting journey, if you will, talked about quiet eye being you set up for the pair,
Mm-hmm.
let your eyes settle in an area, so it's not moving, it's not, you just stay still and let
Mm-hmm.
the eyes settle. But what it sounds like what you're talking about is when you acquire the target and you're about to make the final move, the pulling the trigger, it's
Mm-hmm.
that central lock on that target that's quiet eye. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, completely. And that's tangible and measurable. I think what you're talking about is like a quietness and a stillness, which
Mhm.
again is really important prior to that movement phase. But quiet eye as a definition is essentially the target lock from the visual system onto that target. And there's a myriad of statistical pieces of research done by people far cleverer than me on quiet eye that's really interesting. So yeah.
Can I ask you a question about that? So I had an interesting situation yesterday. I was shooting at Wing and Barrel Ranch here in California, and I was shooting with a friend who's a really good shooter. And I was complaining to him about how I've been struggling with Station 8 on the skeet field. We were shooting sporting, but they happen to have a skeet field as well. Long story short, he goes, let's go look. And so we go over to the skeet field. I stand on Station 8, couldn't hit the first four targets. And then I just locked in on the next round of when I'm shooting him again, and it slows down the target. I'm able to track it better. And he videotaped me doing this, right? The first couple times, because I'm not locking in, I'm just jerky. I'm moving the gun stupidly. And then the times that I did actually lock in, and I remember locking in on the target and slowing it down with my eyes and able to make the smooth move. And when I saw it on video, it looked so much smoother than when I wasn't locked on.
Yep.
How do you train for that, right? Like I get the concept of like locking in and slowing down the target, but how do you train that quiet eye?
It's not easy unless you've got access to things like visual recording software, because if you're not measuring it, you don't actually know how good you are at doing the particular exercise. And I did a little video on my YouTube channel where I went through these eye tracking glasses again with a friend and client, Adam, and this measured our fixation stability. And I'd been doing a little bit of the quiet eye training myself, so I thought I was actually going to be quite good. And I thought when we were shooting the DTL targets that because I knew what I was going to do, my gaze control was going to be pretty decent. It was terrible. It was really poor. And we looked at Adam, who again is shot for Great Britain, and his natural quiet eye technique, purely through 25 years of practice, was really, really good. So his stillness, which you talked about at the start, which is the visual setup, and then that movement to the target, you can physically see how the eyes lock on, and the smoothness and the control of that. So from a training perspective, there are things called Marsden balls that you can buy, which is basically a ball on a string with lots of different targets. There's letters and numbers and emojis and shapes and all that kind of stuff. And you can kind of hook it onto something and swing it around, and you can train your vision to fixate on specific parts. You can do these exercises to metronomes. You can do them on balance balls. There are other apps. So NeuroTracker is really good. There is the Synaptic app you can download that gives you specific activities to train and maintain that fixation. One of the metrics that we assess in an assessment is something called multiple object tracking. And that gives a person a central fixation reference, and it gives them a few different targets which are going to move around a screen, and they have to be able to isolate where those targets are. Mm-hmm. One of the best people I've ever had on this was Richard Folds, and he was able to do 7 pairs of moving objects, so 14 individual targets, and to locate them in space every single time, whereas other people are struggling with 2 or 3.
Wow, okay.
It's a trainable thing. So with experience, you can train to trust that peripheral vision. So you can find that target lock, you can settle into that quiet eye state, which you kind of referred to, but then learn the quiet eye technique of eye stability and tapping into that.
That's interesting that you say that. So, what I realized, and again, I'm just using my anecdotal experience, so just, tell me if I'm thinking of this right. Mm-hmm. What I noticed is, one time I was told by someone that there's your periphery vision, which is what you see all around you. And then there's your central vision, which locks on targets and tracks targets. Mm-hmm. And I think when I was just, again, speaking out loud, I think when I was looking at the house on that 8, I was looking directly at it and I was using my central vision rather than allowing my periphery to pick up the speed angle. Mm-hmm. And then when I moved my whole point out a little bit and my vision a little bit off to the right to let the periphery pick up the speed, then I locked in on the target. Then I was able to smash the target, and it was like, I couldn't miss. So is it fair to say that training your ability to set up your eyes, mm-hmm. let your periphery pick things up, speed angle, and then locking in with your central vision is a training technique you should use when you're shooting and doing those things?
Absolutely right. Yeah, it really is. And it's really important to understand that not everybody's peripheral vision is the same. Mm. And I think I sent you a couple of files. I don't know whether you've got the access to it.
I got them. Do you want me to put something up?
Yeah, so there's a couple of files on there, so which kind of looks like a grid with little squares on it.
Right. So, do
So
you want the video or do you want the picture?
just the image would be good.
This is it. Let me know if you can see it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is a really interesting one. So this is a screenshot of a visual field plot of a client who came to see me, and his issue was he was struggling with what he thought was an eye dominance problem, and it only affected him on batus and loopers. And what this means is all of the little tiny black squares are areas of his peripheral vision that are working perfectly. All of the big black and grey squares are areas of the vision that are impaired. So we can actually see here that there's a curve, an arcuate curve going from sort of left to right, where this vision is actually damaged. And it just so happens that he's a left-handed tutor. This is a left eye, and this is a guy who's got glaucoma. So glaucoma is a group of conditions that damage the nerve in particular ways. And when the nerve gets impaired, you lose parts of your peripheral vision. And it just so happens that in this one, the areas where he's losing his vision is where those looper and batu targets would go.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I haven't actually sent you the other file on this, but the vision in the other eye is perfect. So he's got glaucoma just in the one
He's
eye.
got black dots all over, just not any big squares.
Correct. So the small black squares are normal, and the big black and grey squares are definitely not normal. So this is a pathological disease process which is affecting his target acquisition in particular trajectories. And this is why he felt he had this eye dominance problem. And he does have it, but it's down to something pathological. Whereas a normal visual field plot won't have any of those big squares at all.
If I wanted to find out this about myself, what do I need to act? I mean, I'm here obviously in the US, you're in the UK. I will be coming to the UK next year to shoot a number of clubs, so I would love to chat with you and meet with you. But if I, for the audience that's not out in the UK, what do they need to tell their optometrist if they wanted to get some assessment like this?
Just ask for a visual field test. It takes
Visual field,
2 to 4 minutes. It's really standard. It's an inexpensive test. Here, it's just a normal part of an eye examination that you should have anyway. It's not build anything different. It's just part of another aspect of your visual function. There's another one which is even more spicy. So if you have a little look at the other folder that looks very similar to that, yeah, click on that one. So this is a fun one. So this is another visual field plot.
Is that big enough on the screen?
Yeah, that looks great. So this is a lady who, in certain positions, she felt that she didn't know where the gun was. That was her symptom. So certain areas, I can't see the gun. She'd never done a visual field test ever. She's 60, 61. And when you look at this is not good news. So anything where you've got a defect that respects a midline, either sort of vertical or horizontal, and when there's a degree of symmetry like this, it is either an intracranial bleed or an intracranial mass. And this is a pituitary tumor.
So Ed, does she not know that she can't see, like from her perspective, she still sees, but she doesn't know that she's, well, aside from the fact that she can't see the gun,
Yep.
but it didn't, I guess again, what I'm trying to say is she didn't think of coming in to do this specific. Okay.
She'd been having eye examinations for years, but never done a visual field test. And as you can see, half of the vision on one eye is pretty good. Half of the vision on the other eye is pretty good. So when she's got both eyes open, she doesn't notice that she's really got a problem until the gun's in a particular area of her visual field and her eye barrel target relationship is compromised. Wow. There's no headaches, there's no nausea, there's no other symptoms with this person at all. But when you do a visual field test like this, you get this pretty unpleasant visual field test. And, this requires sort of urgent surgical intervention.
Okay.
Again, this is just part of a normal routine eye exam. So when people have their eyes tested, just ask for a visual field test, because if you don't do the test, you don't find the problems.
Right. Right. Any other? I think there was one more picture. What was the last?
Yeah, the other picture. This is all within the same kind of period. So this is a pretty grainy picture of a right retina. So this is an optic nerve in the middle, which is that little yellowy orangey thing that connects the eye into the brain. You've got all of the retinal vessels, so you've got the veins and the arteries branching around. This is another eye dominance issue, and what you've got there is an absolutely enormous malignant melanoma. So all of that dark area in that sort of inferior zone is a tumor.
Here, up here, or down below?
Down below. So the area at the top is just sort of an artifact from the photography, but all of that heavily pigmented area in that sort of bottom third is a tumor.
Wow.
And again, not been picked up previously. So again, what manifested as an eye dominance problem, a loss of visual function, has actually got a really sort of sinister cause. And these are not common, but each one of those I saw in the sort of 6 weeks into February and March of this year, of shooters who are coming to see me with a visual issue, and that's what we found. And that's again where we said at the start, we've then got this expert world-class ophthalmology team that we can then refer those people into in order to treat their sort of systemic condition.
Mm-hmm. And have you seen major improvements once they've addressed these issues, or?
Well, the fact they're still alive, that's pretty much an improvement. Yeah.
Oh, sure.
With some of those things, that's kind of as good as it gets, because those will switch you off. The glaucoma won't, but the glaucoma, if undiagnosed, will just kill off more of your vision. But the pit tumor and that malignant melanoma, those will switch you off.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a kind of dumb question here, like about eye dominance? I know this is a topic that comes up quite a bit in clay shooting. There's a lot of importance put on it. A lot of folks end up switching, sides of where they shoot because of it. Does eye dominance change over time, or when you're under pressure, or can you just shed some light on eye dominance as a topic?
Yeah, it's a really important question. So it's really important to understand and actually define what we mean when we talk about eye dominance. And eye dominance for me is which eye at a given point in time your brain takes the most information from. And it's really important to understand that it can change, it can fluctuate. There are a myriad reasons why somebody may be cross-dominant. And there are lots of different reasons why that dominance can change. So I've had clients who come in to see me, and their eye dominance problem is, if we go front to back, for example, something as basic as dry eye. They've got one eye where the tear film starts to disperse and evaporate. So at a moment in time, the quality of the visual data getting into that eye is suboptimal. It suddenly becomes much better in the other eye. The brain takes more notice of that.
Interesting. Okay. I suffer from dry eye, so this is actually an interesting topic for me, but sorry, continue.
Dry eye, it's so basic and it's so important. The purpose of your tear film is to hydrate, lubricate, deliver oxygen, acts as an antimicrobial capacity to the eye to protect it, but it's the first lens. So it's before the light from that target even gets into the eye, it's got to go through your tear film. And your tear film is made of 3 different layers. You've got a mucousy layer that sticks the tears onto the eye, an aqueous watery layer in the middle, and then an oily lipid layer on the top. And if one or more of those layers is produced in the wrong ratio, it affects the quality of your vision. And sometimes the most mundane thing of sorting your tear film out can improve those transient eye dominant shifts. You then walk further through the eye. If you've got corneal problems, you mentioned astigmatism. If astigmatism starts to become pathological, that's what we call keratoconus. And that's where the cornea starts to bulge and become erratic and it starts to change. If you get somebody who's got keratoconus in one eye that's developing, again, the quality of the data reduces, causes an eye dominance problem. You get things like early lens changes inside. People start to develop cataracts, causes an eye dominance problem. You get changes in the vitreous humor inside the eye. You get floaters, you get debris that comes in as that vitreous liquefies and changes over time. Anything that affects the quality of that data transfer changes that eye from being 8K Ultra HD into like an analog crappy transient signal. Mm-hmm. You then look at, is the optic nerve changing? Is the retina changing? Have they got macular degeneration? Have they got hypertension, blood sugar problems like diabetes? Have they then got an issue between how the optic nerve and the brain communicate? You've got 6 pairs of muscles that move your eyes around, remember. So your eyes are like 2 video cameras, and each eye is getting the image of that target from a slightly different perspective. You've got muscles that move the eyes laterally and vertically in the subtle torsional, what we call cyclotorsional movements. And like any muscle system in your body, your eyes do get affected by stress and fatigue and hydration and hormone levels and meds, and all these different things can change how these finely balanced cameras communicate with one another. There's even a paper that's been done, I think it was Kahn and Crawford in 2001, I might be wrong, and they actually found that eye dominance can change as a function of where you look. So your horizontal gaze angle. So if I keep my head really still and I look extreme to the left and extreme to the right, and then all of a sudden I'm into the gun, looking across the gun, and my glasses are fitting not correctly, and all these different things, and my gun mount's poor, you can physically measure, and it's not a guess. You can measure this with an MRI, so it's factual. You can physically measure which part of the brain is being stimulated and which is their dominant eye. So the people who say that eye dominance doesn't exist do not know what they're talking about.
I really appreciate you bringing this up because this has been something that I've noticed with my shooting sometimes, where if the target's coming from my left, and I'm right-handed, right eye dominant,
Yep.
you know, but I tend to have sometimes central vision and sometimes my left eye will pick up targets. But if
Mm-hmm.
it's coming from my left, I have to turn my head more.
Yep.
Well, this is what I've told myself at least, but it sounds like it's being corroborated by what you're saying. I have to turn my head more so that my right eye picks up the target first so I can carry it into my, break point, if you will, right?
Yep. Yep.
So that is a thing, is what you're saying. That, if I didn't set up my eyes more and I'm looking to the left, my
Mm-hmm.
left eye could be the one picking it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if you think about it, for example, if I now look across to my left, if I am moving my hand around, my right eye can't even see my hand because it's
Right,
occluded by my nose.
right, right.
So if I've now got both eyes open, the only eye that can see my hand in this position is my left one.
Hmm.
So it has to be dominant for that target in this position, because to my right eye, it doesn't exist. So what is the way I look at eye dominance is, how does it affect the eye barrel target relationship? That's the crucial thing. And we want to try to make sure that the relationship between the sighting eye, the position of where the barrel is relative to where the target is going, that has to be a constant. And if it's not a constant, if it starts to waver because of any of those factors that we mentioned a few minutes ago, that causes a problem.
Yeah.
I've had people whose eye dominance occurs because their contact lenses are wrong. They're an astigmat like you, and with astigmatism, you have a power of the lens and an axis value.
Hmm.
And the lens has to sit in exactly the right position. And if you've got a contact lens that doesn't fit you quite right, and you move your eyes quickly, and the lens does this, it oscillates, you lose your picture. And that can cause an eye dominance problem because all of a sudden the other eye sees the target better and the barrel moves.
Can I ask you about that? Because I really genuinely mean this when I say this. You're not paying me to say what I'm about to say right now. I bought your glasses, and I wear different lenses and different
Oh,
glasses. I've had Pila prescription, I've had Ranger prescription, and I've had your glasses prescription. Then obviously wear what I wear for work and daily life. What I've noticed with your glasses, though, is there something that you did with my prescription? Because I shoot well when I shoot with your glasses, but what I've been a little bit of a detriment is I have the purple tint
yeah,
Hirokis,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
so maybe in certain lights I probably need to switch to something different. But I see so clearly with your glasses. So what I've noticed about my, like, these glasses, for example, I don't see as clear, even though these are more updated in
Mhm.
terms of my prescription than the one that I bought from you, right? So was there something that you did specifically for shooters where you maybe expand the field of view, or can you touch on that a little bit, or am I just imagining that?
Nope. So it's down to the quality of the manufacture of the lens.
Okay.
So if you have say if we take a prescription value of -2, for example,
Hmm.
if you use a standard basic lens blank, it's -2 wherever you look through that lens. Now, if you have a frame that is a particular size, the distance from the eye to the lens will change based on where you look.
Right.
Okay. So in the center, it may be 10 mil, for example, the distance from the cornea to the lens. If you look into the corner at the top, it may be 14 mil. If you look down to the side, it may be 15 mil. The distance between the eye and the lens changes the relative power. And that's really, really important. So what we did with ours, and what I think Pila do with theirs, is we use something called digital surfacing technology. So we use a much cleverer design of how the lens is lathed. So we individually match and tweak and modify the prescription based on the size.
Right, right.
So instead of it being -2 everywhere, it may be -2 here, -1.97 there, -2.12 here, based on the algorithm, so that when you're looking into the sweet spot of the lens, then that prescription is perfectly dialed in.
Yeah, I've honestly noticed it, and I didn't notice it for a while, but I was, I thought maybe it was, placebo or something. I was like, why am I tend to shoot better when I'm wearing your glasses. And again, this is not a plug for your business, but hey, it happens to be, right? And we didn't plan this. I'm just being honest, 100% genuine on this. And with
Nice.
my other prescriptions, like I shoot well with those glasses as well, but I just noticed I see better while I'm looking around the glass lenses, and
Yep.
uh,
And that was one of the key things with why I sort of design them like that. So I was getting clients who were coming in to see me who wanted all of the performance of the more aggressively sporty styled glasses that were on the market, but they wanted a different aesthetic. They wanted something that they could perhaps wear as a casual product, or for English game shooting. They didn't want a wraparound or something which looked like you could be wearing it in the Tour de France, for example. They wanted something that was like a nice looking pair of sunglasses.
right.
So it was based on my clients coming in that said, "Have you got something that looked like this?" And I
Yeah.
said, "No." So I designed it. I just thought, right, I'm going to start to make this, because I'm getting too many people coming asking for products that don't exist at the moment. And then it was all of the R&D and the research as to what makes a really good quality optical pair of glasses. So the next time you get your eyes examined, and the next time you have a normal pair of glasses made like that, ask for digital surfacing technology, because it exists.
Say it again. Ask for.
Digital surfacing technology.
Okay. Okay.
And then you can have a customized lens that takes all of those parameters into account. It takes into account the wrap of the frame, the pantoscopic tilt, the angle, all of these different things. And it's like having an off-the-peg suit versus a bespoke suit that's made perfectly for you. So I wanted to incorporate that into our shooting glasses.
I want to touch into Edwards Eyewear and kind of what you've done with your business. It's Flint Optometry, right?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, and we'll definitely get into the business side of your thing, but just sticking with the, vision and performance piece of it. From what we talked about earlier, it sounds like there's so much to take into consideration when it comes to your eyes and how you use it and what's specific to you, right? Like, for example, me looking more to the left when I have to pick up the target with my right eye. When you've worked with elite shooters, is this the type of stuff that you guys are talking about? Is this what separates the elite from just the average Joe shooter?
Yeah, very much so. It's what we call an aggregation of marginal gains.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's trying to find 1% of improvement, but in 5 or 6 different areas, which when put together can make a statistically significant improvement on how that person performs. So if somebody is, for example, an E-class shooter or a C-class in the UK who gets to shoot once a month and never has a lesson, they can have the best eyesight in the world and they're still going to be a C or an E-class shooter.
Right.
If you've got somebody who's got a physical, visual, not disability, but an area of their vision that's letting them down, then I can improve that and I can work with them to optimize it so that they're seeing things how they should do. And sometimes people will be having loads of lessons and coaching, but if they're not seeing the target how their instructor sees it or how the instructor wants them to see it, they then can't put into practice the technique they're trying to be taught.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So would you call it an aggregate collection
Yeah.
of marginal improvement?
Yeah, an aggregation of marginal gains.
Gains, got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And it can be, and that's based on what we can actually physically assess and measure, and then the steps that we can put in place to improve that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that is really important is if I make significant visual difference to that person, they then need to work really carefully with their coach to learn those new pictures.
Mm,
Because sometimes somebody's performance will actually go down because they're then seeing the target in a different way to which they're accustomed. We'll take business partner and great friend of mine, Ed Solomons, for example. So I first met Ed as a client, and he came to see me, and he'd been shooting really well historically in glasses that were okay. And then I thought, we can make these a lot better. And then all of a sudden, we gave him the visual tools to see to his potential. And this is really important. So people don't see to the same level. If somebody says, I have 20/20 vision, I say, so what? 20/20 vision isn't good. 20/20 vision is absolutely bog standard average. That's the minimum you should be achieving.
right.
We want you to be 1 or 2 standard deviations better than 20/20 to even have a conversation about having good eyesight. 20/20 is not good vision. And having 20/20 vision just means that you are missing so much data that other people will be seeing. So I took Ed from that 20/20 standard to 2012, 2010. And all of a sudden that changed his target acquisition. So it messed up his reaction time to start with, because he's seeing targets early and slashing into them. And it took him, 1,000 rounds or so to start to learn the pictures, and then goes and wins his first world title. I can't take all credit for that. I'll take most of the credit, but not all of it. But these are the kind of changes that happen. If we change the way in which you perceive where that target is and how you engage with it, you then need to learn the pictures.
No, I absolutely went through the same experience myself when I ended up getting glasses because I didn't realize how much detail I was missing, and I didn't realize the contrast I was missing also. And so things looked smaller to me, like the targets looked smaller than what I was used to,
Yep.
where I was seeing a little bit more of a fuzz ball. No, it wasn't really a fuzz ball, but you know what I mean? The edges were a little fuzzy. I could still see the target clearly. And then when I got the clarity, it almost made the target smaller, and I was, like you said, able to pick it up earlier. I could pick up the speed faster somehow. So no, that's an interesting scenario. So
It's really important. I mean, just recently I've been working with a shooter virtually in the US, and she's been struggling a lot. And she sent me her refractive results, and she's got a small amount of astigmatism, like 3/4 of a diopter. It's not a lot, but her clinician had said she doesn't need to worry about it. She absolutely does need to worry about it because her vision is 20/25. And I said, just try a Johnson & Johnson commercially available AccuView Oasis for astigmatism daily disposable lens, and her vision has just gone straight up.
yeah.
And she's had a massive improvement in her ability because her vision's gone from being okay to being exceptional.
Hmm, hmm.
It is just sometimes these super simple things that can make a real difference.
So once you've corrected, right, and you're getting the best possible picture that you can for a competition or anything, what are some of the, patterns or, techniques that some of the pro shooters or, world level shooters are using to maximize their ability to shoot?
Sometimes you'll watch the elite people and it looks as though they've got all the time in the world
Right.
because they've made,
That's one example of a guy that it looks like he's just got all the time in the world when he's shooting. And
yeah,
apparently if he's looking at, he could look at 14 different objects at the same time. If I understood that correctly, that explains a lot.
yeah. And it sometimes I think it's to do with things like pre-shot routine and making your plan based on real conscious processing of visual data before you get into the cage. Where's the target coming from? Where do I see it first? Where do I see it clearly? Where do I want to break it? Where am I going to stand in the cage to put myself in the best position? Where's my gun hold? Where am I going to look? What technique am I going to use? All of that computational stuff is done before they go in, and then they go in and execute the plan smoothly. Sometimes the plan's wrong, so you have to
Yeah.
change your plan. But you get the guys who haven't made their plan until they're there. And then it's kind of oh shit, where's the target? And it's a bit panicky. And sometimes you can shoot instinctively the first couple of pairs, and then you start to go into conscious brain mode and you start to try to repeat the picture that you saw instinctively, and then you start to miss. So
Right.
we shoot best when we're in that subconscious competence zone. And as soon as we start getting that excessive mental chatter, we start trying not to miss. We start measuring lead out. We start bouncing fixation between the bird and the barrel and back again. And it all starts to go wrong, you know?
That's my biggest challenge is the bird, the barrel awareness. There's times when I'm lacking confidence, I will absolutely check the barrel and it drives me insane. And there's times when I don't even think about the barrel and I'm looking at the target. I know where the barrel is, but I'm looking at the target and I'm able to make it work. What visual mistakes do you see a lot of pro shooters make? Is it similar to that, or are they making other types of mistakes?
Yeah, I think again that the barrel awareness is really, really important. So you'll see some people say, "I don't see the gun." You
Hmm.
do. It's 30 or 32 inches of steel in front of your face. If you physically don't see the gun, you might
Right,
have a pituitary brain tumor. You might need to go to A&E and get checked
right,
because
right,
the gun is there. You know, that having a degree of barrel awareness is important because you need to know how to join those pieces together. Um, you want to be able to accept that picture peripherally and have 99% of your focus on the target, but still know where the gun is.
right.
Some people have more of a 75-25 perspective because they know what works for them. Some people are very barrel aware and they really like to consistently join those pieces together. Um,
Can I ask about that? So, there's times I've noticed, maybe we could touch on the funnel part of your vision when you're looking through something, right? If a target's within like, let's say 20, 30 yards, I'm not funneled in as much. And so I don't need to, the barrel awareness, it doesn't need to be as strong. But if I'm looking at a far target that's slow and I need to be really focused on something way out there and I need to make my vision more funneled, and then the barrel's there too, it's like picking up that barrel, connection too. Am I making sense what I'm saying? Like, so how do you work that funnel? How do you work the ability to pull back but also zoom in and not be so barrel aware when you're zoomed in, if that makes sense?
I would literally say time behind the gun on that specific type of target and making almost a physical conscious measurement of how much perception you've got of that. So sort of thinking, am I 50% focused? Am I 75% focused? And it's going to vary depending on person to person. There are again world champion shooters that I've had in my chair in my office who say on certain targets like that, actually close an eye.
Yeah,
They
right, right.
99% of the targets with both eyes open, but on certain targets they want to make sure of, they'll actually close the eye down and rifle shoot it. And this is where people don't tell you everything they know.
Yeah,
And some of the guys at the top of the game don't want to give away their secrets. They'll
right.
tell you stuff because it might mean that you don't do it, or they don't want you to do what they're doing, and all this kind of stuff. But people work out their own visual technique that predisposes them to success and that works around little quirks or little issues that they've got. But we
Well,
need to know.
speaking of that, so I close an eye on close quartering targets because I don't know the right terminology here, but I'm going to say stereoscopic vision maybe gets a little messed up because if it's close and quartering, for some reason I have to close an eye on those. But you're saying for some folks, closing an eye on far distant ones help them hit the
Yeah,
target.
yeah.
So is there a thing to that where close versus far, closing an eye, makes a difference or not?
Without sort of sitting on the fence, it's personal preference. And without sort of wiring somebody up to a functional MRI and looking at which areas of their brain are being stimulated, you can't measure it.
Right.
You
Okay.
can measure it, but it would be a rather clunky thing to do by hooking people up to this kind of stuff. But you've got to work out what works for you, and and it literally is a trial and error thing. And again, the people who say that you've got to shoot both eyes open at all times, and no one's going to shoot well if they close an eye on certain targets. Rubbish.
No, I'm glad you said this because this is kind of confirming some suspicions I had, but had no way of verifying or confirming it. How much does so one of those things is that my nutrition, when I'm out in the course, and look, I've been shooting for a long time, but I'm one of those dumb guys that like I learn a lesson and then I forget it like 2 days later, and then it takes me a while to figure it out again. And one of
Yeah,
those lessons I learned was if I'm shooting a 100 round course, I need to eat in the middle of that course because I start to fade. And whether it's my energy, whether it's my, hydration or whatever it is. How much does nutrition and hydration affect your eyes? You mentioned the hydration already, but can you touch on that?
Yeah, I think there are nuances here, and there are, some of the best shooters in the world aren't necessarily in the best physical shape, and what they eat and drink doesn't necessarily affect them at all. You get other people who are almost metabolically on a knife edge and are very sensitive to changes in hydration and insulin sensitivity, glycemic control, all these different factors. For me, if you can, what we want to do is to reduce variables. We want to try to make things consistent for success. And keeping yourself hydrated, keeping yourself fueled, for me, is just a no-brainer. If that makes you hit one target out of 500, you will do it. Things which have slow release carbohydrates are great. It's not very exciting, but kind of porridge oats, it's sweet potatoes, it's that kind of thing. If you get somebody who goes and chugs a can of Monster or Red Bull or something, they get like this immediate sort of caffeine and sugar surge, which might carry them through to the entirety of the course. But some other people, 20 to 30 minutes after that, get a massive crash. And the crash that they experience is far greater in degradation of performance than the improvement in performance they had from ingesting that product to begin with. And again, you'll get other people who it becomes part of their routine. They'll go and have 20 cigarettes in the morning, and a load of coffee, and that doesn't affect them. And you get other people who are very sensitive to those things. The great thing these days is you can make much more assessment of your functional health through apps. There are wearables these days, and you can track on your phone what your blood sugar is doing, and all of these things. So for people who want to analyze that, there are pieces of technology that help to optimize it. And if your desire is to be the best athlete you can, then having a handle on all of these different factors can only be an advantage.
Yeah, it makes sense because what I think you kind of are touching on is, and we've touched on before in the podcast, is experience really helps in the long run in this whole thing, right? Going through the competition, shooting different places, all the variables that you need to figure out for what works for you takes time and energy and effort and experience to develop. So it sounds like it's all the same with the eyes as well.
It is, and as we said, one of the things that's really important for me to just go over again is you can have the best vision, you can have the best contacts, you can have the best glasses, you can have the best strength and conditioning, but if you haven't put range time with an expert coach to teach you the technique of how to break a 50-yard chandelle, all of the rest is pointless.
Right.
Because if you don't understand the relationship of the gun kinematics and where that target is going and where you need to put the shot cloud relative to that target, the rest of it is kind of pointless. But once you've got that understanding, all of the rest becomes very, very, very important indeed to make sure you can do that repeatedly and consistently.
Right. No, that makes sense.
But, and harking back briefly to what you talked about your setup on position for making sure that the correct eye is picking the target up. The guy with the glaucoma that we looked at with the visual field defects, the main thing for him now, for me, was to communicate to his coach, that part of his eyesight is never going to improve, ever. It's damaged forever. Right. So he now needs to adopt a very unusual position in the cage and an unusual visual hold point in order to be able to see that target. Mm-hmm. So he then has to undergo a different kind of coaching that's unusual to enable him to see the bird and break it. Because if he just goes through the same mechanics, he's always going to be hampered by that visual defect. So this is where tailoring the coaching, the technique, based on the visual behavior of the person is really important.
Interesting. Speaking of that, what I find is I'm generally good with like a reactive type shot, right? And I'm trying to develop my ability to anticipate a shot. And I was working with a pro level coach, and he noticed this about me. He noticed that I have good hand-eye coordination when I'm being reactive. But if I need to sit with the target for a while and follow it and track it and anticipate, through the trajectory, I tend to struggle there. So how do you work with that? How do you develop that ability to go from like I'm just talking out loud here, so forgive me if I'm not making sense. Just ask if you need me to explain. But Like going from a soft focus, barrels in your face, you're tracking the target, and then you're ramping down on it versus just I'm looking at the target, I put the gun up and I snap shoot it, right?
Mhm.
How do you develop more of a anticipatory type eyesight versus reaction? Sorry, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I hope that's clear.
I think I experienced something very similar when I was shooting with, again, with other ed. So from shooting a bit of trap, I sort of can shoot things reasonably quickly, but not necessarily that accurately. And sometimes I'll use a slightly unconventional, aggressive, fast gun and ambush a target, but can do it sometimes without that much control. And there
Right.
was a really clever pair, which was a fast quarter away orange 70 mil and a really nice, slow, long, loopy target incoming as the report bird. And I was absolutely balling the first target because I was shooting aggressively. And I then carried that instinctive, speedy aggression into the second bird and kept missing them.
Hmm.
So Ed was then saying, well, basically, I don't think you guys like this word in America, so I'm not going to say it. You're shooting that like a idiot. So
A nonce? No, I'm kidding. That word in the UK.
yeah, we definitely don't want to talk about that. So essentially, I was just shooting with that sort of instinctive, reactive technique, which meant it carried far too much gun movement into the report bird. So he got me to slow everything down and be more deliberate, and
Mhm.
it took me 9 or 10 shots to be able to pick up the first bird again because I was actually seeing a different picture. I was seeing lead on the target that I wasn't used to because when I
Mhm.
was shooting aggressively, I matched the speed, I just nudged in front and I didn't see any lead at all. When I was shooting with more control, I could see a relationship between the
Right.
barrel and the bird. So this is about lead perception. Lead perception is so variable for the person. So what you might think is 3 yards at 30 yards, I might think is six, or I might think is one, because
Right.
everybody's perception of scale is different. But also gun speed creates lead. So, or takes lead away depending on how you shoot it. So, if I shoot everything with an aggressive, fast moving gun, I'll see less lead than if I shoot it with a slow maintained or slow pull away. The
Hmm.
actual lead is the same, of course, but the perceived lead is different. So I was then having to learn that slower, more controlled gun speed, which goes right back to that Causer and Bennett article from 2010 about quiet eye, long quiet eye, slower gun speed. And then after time and time and time, I started to put the pictures together. So it's understanding and repeating that process that for me started to make sense.
So is that touching on like hard focus then and when to hard focus? Like, in general, everyone's always talking about hard focus being a good strategy, but can it sometimes interfere with your ability to move the gun?
Yeah, very much so. For me, watching again the elite shooters, again watching Richard Folds, for example, that transition of soft, relaxed focus into hard focus and
Mhm.
then dropping it off and transitioning back again into hard focus, that ability to control is just world class. If you try and hard focus all the time, it's exhausting.
Mhm.
It's fatiguing. So you just want to be able to switch on in that instant, maintain it, and then relax, and then switch back on and maintain it, and then relax. And it's just learning those sort of almost that metronomic transition from those different focus strategies.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So, a lot of people just say, just look at the target and everything else will follow.
Mhm.
Is that really a complete approach, or is there more to just looking at the target, you think?
It's it's a massive oversimplification. It's like if you had a track and field lesson with Usain Bolt, and he says just run faster.
Right. Just run fast.
Okay, yeah. So at the minute I can do 100 meters in 15 seconds. How do I get to 9.8? Just run
Right.
quicker.
Right, right, right.
So just look at the target. Yeah, that's a very reductive approach, because just looking at the target, as I think as Ed Solomons has said, if he just got his mum to shoot a target and just said, just look at it, she's not going to do that.
Right.
You have to get the fundamentals of how to approach a target rather than just looking at it helps. It's very difficult to hit a bird consistently when you're not looking at it, but there's a lot of other stuff to do as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think as you're getting more advanced, right, and you're getting to a point where just looking at it isn't the only part of it, and you're understanding what just looking at it actually means. I think
Mm-hmm.
it gets more complex. Everything about this game I found is the rabbit hole goes deep. Whether it's your technique, whether it's your gear, whether it's your eyesight, whether it's it can go deep as long as you want it to go. So no, that's interesting.
And there are certain things with it. It all depends on the complexity of the targets. So if you've got a novice course, for example, or if you've got a club that has shot the same targets on a Sunday for the last 20 years and never changed them, then you can probably get away with suboptimal technique because the targets aren't particularly challenging, and you could shoot the course on one leg if you wanted to, but that doesn't then mean that you can do the world championships at EJ Churchill's, which is happening now, and shoot
Right.
those kind of level targets with the same lack of attention to detail. So yeah,
Right.
I think there's a lot more to it than just
Um, be honest with us here. So, and I know this affects so you might be a little biased about this given that your business, but I think you're gonna be interested, or I'm interested in this question. What's the truth about shooting glasses and lens tints? Can they really, really improve your performance, or is it mostly psychological?
really, really good question. So as we've said, vision and shooting are intrinsically linked. So
Right.
the way in which you make visual contact with that target determines every method and manner with which you engage with it. And if a pair of shooting glasses gives you better protection from glare, better protection from impact, better confidence that you've got a product that mitigates contrast and all of the other sorts of issues, does that mean that visual picture is better? Then yeah, absolutely, it's going to help you engage it. But again, you could have somebody who has got no technical ability and has spent $2,000 on glasses, and they'll be terrible.
Right. Right.
If you take the three best shooters in the world, put two of them in the best glasses that are most effective for them, and somebody else in a pair of really poor quality optics, for example, that they got from the hardware shop, then it stands to reason that the people with the better tools are going to be better.
Mhm.
But shooting glasses is not a substitute for hard work.
Right.
They're a necessary mandatory product in competitive shooting, that if you have some really good quality shooting glasses from Hiller and Randolph and ourselves, then they're going to be a positive impact. But you look at back in the day when people didn't have to wear them, people still shot amazing scores. But now you do, and it's mandatory and it's sensible. Why not use something that potentially gives you more benefit? The psychology side of things is really important, and it's nice to have nice stuff. And if you've got somebody who wants to feel that they see comfortably and looking good is important to them, and all these different things that make them psychologically more attuned and confident, then they carry that confidence into their performance. Yeah, so I would say that it's important. It's not essential, but it's important, and it can be used as a very much a positive step in somebody's makeup. Yeah.
Okay. So
I
yeah,
think.
and ever since everyone's different and their eyesight's different,
Yeah.
the lens tints can make it different. So for example, for me, what I found is, anecdotally speaking, when it's very, very bright, I like a really dark lens. I've got brown eyes. I don't know if that matters, but I've heard eye color matters with light and coming in. And then on really green backgrounds, when I have a purple lens, and I have the purple Hirokis, and I also have purple Pilas, I
Mm-hmm.
tend to shoot better when I'm wearing purple against a green background because of the contrast change. So those are legitimate. That's not me just thinking that. That's a legitimate
Yep. Yep.
benefit.
And you get people, for example, you know, one in between 1 in 8 to 1 in 10 males are red green color deficient. So they've got a genetic issue with how the cone cells in the retina are, so they don't see color in the same way. So if you've got an orange target against a green background, that person does not see that target as well as somebody who doesn't have that problem. If they have a really deeply saturated red-based lens, like the Pillar RG, HL and RGLs, the 39 CIG lenses, the Vermilions from Randolph Engineering, that means that they will see that target better than they did before. You get other degrees of personal preference, and it's so subjective. I'm quite light sensitive, and I tend to find that I'm just much more visually comfortable in what we typically call colder, cooler color lenses like greys and purples. If we go and shoot with my wife, for example, she absolutely hates them. She finds them too suppressive. She finds they steal too much data. She likes reds and high contrast yellows.
And what color eyes does she have?
So she's got bright blue eyes,
Okay.
which you would then think may mean that she's perhaps a bit more light sensitive because there's more light coming in, and she's absolutely not. She wants more. If you look again at myself and other Ed, we've got dark eyes. We hate bright light. So a lot of the stuff that you hear isn't necessarily true.
Okay.
And people sometimes end up buying too many lenses because something new's come out and they've just bought it without trying it. And they've bought into the marketing hype, and they've got 40, 50 different lenses with them, and they're spending more time worrying about which shade of pink to wear than actually where's the target coming from? What method do I use?
Right.
They're attributing far too much mental energy to lens tint than what they actually need to do with the bird. But yeah, so lens tint is important. You have to weigh up how much light is getting in with how much data you can comfortably manage. Some people, the visual cortex in their brain does not like too much data. Pale colored lenses, high energy lenses overwhelm you. It puts you into a glare state. When you're in the glare state, you don't focus as well. So you end up going down a spiral in a high contrast lens that if you put them in something more neutral and more suppressive, that person chills out and relaxes. You get other people maybe whose visual acuity is not so good, people who've got a little bit of early cataract, for example. You put them in a dark lens and they hate it. You put them in something high contrast and all of a sudden they get more data in. It's all about data flow and data processing. And it's how that person responds as an individual is absolutely crucial.
Is how big of a deal, and this is going to sound like a dumb question, but I'm curious because I'm thinking of when I wasn't able to see I mean, I was able to see, but I wasn't as able to see as good as when I got corrected. But how big of a deal is depth perception in clay shooting? Is it more important when, versus like a clear background, like I'm shooting against a blue sky versus I'm shooting against a background of trees and bushes and things like that? How much does that affect your depth perception? And can you also even improve your depth perception? I know it's a lot of questions, but
another really good and perceptive question, because you've got to first of all say, what does depth perception mean?
yeah.
And we talk about depth perception, but you can measure it. It's a physical, measurable phenomenon as to what somebody's stereopsis is, which is a relationship between the two eyes and their ability to judge where things are in space. It's best, you get your best stereopsis with two eyes open, where the two eyes are working together and based on parallax and other sorts of things. But people can actually get depth perception in a monocular state based on what we call monocular cues. So there are other things such as relative size and shape and shadowing and all sorts of stuff which can give somebody who is monocular depth perception. But true depth perception, true stereopsis, is predicated on having each eye equally focused, working in tandem, and able to pick out those cues up. So people talk about having depth perception, and I've actually then assessed them, and they're shooting both eyes open, for example, but one eye is actually not working, and they didn't know. They've actually got a suppressive problem. So they've actually had a physical, fundamental, developmental issue, which they didn't know they had, where one eye is actually not working at all. They're actually only getting signal from one eye. And they're talking about depth perception and the benefit of having both eyes open when they're shooting. And they didn't even know that they're actually essentially shooting monocularly because one eye doesn't work.
Wow.
So it's really interesting. I mean, we've got a 3-dimensional shot string, haven't we? And if we were playing cornhole, for example, or we're throwing a ball into a bucket, depth perception is absolutely crucial for that. But there's an argument for saying that your depth perception on a sporting clays course actually isn't necessarily that important at all.
Hmm.
Your perception of distance based on size, you can actually tell whether something is, small or further away, and you can build up your relative depth perception inventory in your head based on that, rather than an actual measurement in seconds of arc on your stereopsis. So we have to be careful when we sort of throw terms around like depth perception. And I heard a really good super world level shooter talking about visual acuity, and what he meant by visual acuity was nothing to do with what visual acuity means.
Hmm.
Visual acuity is a measurement of somebody's ability to pick up detail. He was actually talking about visual acuity in a very odd way, which had nothing to do with a measurable level of visual performance in the slightest. So, so it's a really good question, and it all kind of, if somebody's got better depth perception, it can only be an advantage. But
Okay.
not
Okay.
everybody's depth perception is the same, and you take 50 different people, and you might have 20 different measurements of depth perception.
Wow.
People don't know it.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just to summarize what you're saying here is well, it's important, but it's not as important as everyone's putting emphasis, or not everyone, but I'm putting emphasis on. But understanding that, because what you said about the target inventory, right, and the
Yeah,
size of the target and where the bird barrel relationship is in terms of that, that has nothing to do with depth perception. It has to do with the sight picture that you're seeing, and that could be a two-dimensional in your mind sight picture, and so you figure out what that sight picture looks like. But in cornhole, where you're projecting something out and it's dropping into a hole, you have to kind of understand that arc and trajectory that's going to go into it. You can't see the shot coming out of your gun. So maybe
precisely.
depth perception isn't as important as it would be in cornhole. Is that kind of what you're alluding
Yeah,
to? Or
that's my understanding and my thought process about it. Yeah,
okay,
absolutely, it is.
interesting.
And I know it's just one example, but if you look at somebody like Dave Carey, who won the World Veteran Fit Ass Championship in 2014, and he's a prodigiously talented game shooter,
Mhm.
80, 90-yard birds, he's only got one eye. The other one's prosthetic.
Really?
So his ability to shoot big crossing targets with consistency is world class, and he's only got one eye, so he hasn't got depth perception apart from what he's learned as a monocular cue. And I know that's just one example, but there are myriad that I can talk about.
Mhm.
Um, there are, and again, I know it's different, but there are Olympic trap shooters who have shot in the Olympics and medaled, who shoot with one eye shut.
Mhm.
You look at someone like Kim Rode, for example, an absolutely unbelievably talented artist with a shotgun, shoots with a range of glasses completely taped over.
Really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Her depth perception,
So you do have depth perception with one eye. It's
yeah,
just different than being
yeah,
stereoscopic.
yes. So you get monocular depth cues, which
Okay.
is different to binocular stereopsis. Yes, but if you had only one eye and you didn't have any depth perception, you would not be able to park your
Walk
car.
or do anything, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to know where you were relative to the desk. You'd walk into that. You wouldn't be able to
Sure.
pour a cup of coffee, for example, because your
Sure.
perception of where things are in space relative to you would be wrong.
Interesting. That's interesting. Yeah. I didn't think of it that way, but you're right. Yeah, that makes sense. And that makes sense why maybe some shooters are shooting long, far targets when they close an eye, they're still able to get it because they've trained their ability, their depth perception ability on a distance.
Yeah, yeah, and as we said, as you said at the start, it's joining those pieces of information together. You're almost looking at a vector on this kind of axis. You're not looking at it on this axis. It's lateral. You
Hmm.
can tell whether a target is an incomer or something that's going away versus crossing, and and because we have this 3D shot cloud as well, there's factors in there to consider as well.
Hmm. Well, it sounds like was it David Carey, his potential was not limited by his situation, right? But are there situations where your pupils and your eye structure, for example, like your interpupillary distance, which is my understanding is the distance between where your pupils are, and people have varying interpupil distance, and then maybe eye dominant strength too. Is there like a ceiling some people will reach given their facial structure, eye structure, etc.?
Yeah, I think if we If we look at factors that change, so as we said, if there are reasons why somebody's dominant eye might fluctuate, then that will categorically have a deleterious effect on their performance. I
Mm-hmm.
think stuff like interpupillary distance, because it is after your growth cycles have finished, your PD is pretty much fixed. The effect of localizing yourself in space is not going to change. If your pupil distance did fluctuate, and actually now I'm thinking about it, this is really interesting. So if you look at how the two eyes work relative to one another,
Right.
your ability to maintain fusion on an object is the relationship between your right eye and your left eye fusing the objects in space.
Mm-hmm.
If you have something called a aphoria, which basically means that your eyes are slightly misaligned, but you have enough fusional reserves, you have enough muscle strength to overcome that natural tendency to break apart. If you get stressed or fatigued or dehydrated, that fusional reserve will change. So then you break fusion and your IPD will change.
Interesting. So this
Because
is why I wanted to touch on this because I believe, and I'm going to get it tested, but I
uh-huh,
believe I have that
yeah,
misalignment, if you will, and
yeah,
you could probably tell, or you may not be able to tell from the video.
mm-hmm.
But my eyes aren't fixed in one area, but at times they are, and at times they aren't. So hydration and nutrition have a lot to do with that.
Yeah, they can do, but also this is again is measurable. It's called your fusional reserves, which is the amount of muscular power that you have to get the two eyes to lock into focus.
Okay.
And this can degrade over time. You also have your cranial nerves, which tell your muscles what to do. So sometimes, if you've got somebody who breaks fusion, it may be a muscle weakness or a muscle overaction that pulls the eyes offline, or it might be a cranial nerve issue where the nerve isn't telling the muscle how to respond properly.
Hmm.
So if you've got somebody that has this binocular vision problem, then it's important to understand what the root cause of that is and then how to fix it. So if you've got somebody who is what we call exophoric, so their eyes naturally want to sit in a divergent position, you can actually train your medial rectus muscles by your nose with things like the Brock string and the fusion cards to help to gain those fusional reserves to lock them together.
Okay.
If you get what we call a phoria, which breaks into a tropia, which is where essentially the eye just wanders off on its own. Sometimes you then need extraocular eye muscle surgery. So, with a binocular vision ophthalmologist to surgically realign the eyes. Now, I've had clients who have got normal visual behavior in this primary gaze. And as soon as they mount the gun, because they're in a different head position, there's different stresses and strains on the muscles, and they have an eye muscle problem that only transpires when they have a gun to the shoulder.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's also really, really important. So again, this is something that I do, which most good optometrists should do, which is a full binocular vision workup. You can have an eye that sees really well and another eye that sees really well, but if they don't communicate together, then you're in a whole world of pain.
So you need to go to an optometrist for that type of assessment.
An
Op-
optometrist or an orthoptist, a good ophthalmologist will be able to do this as well. But sometimes they don't necessarily look at this from a how it
Sporting,
affects you
shooting,
pain.
competitive,
Correct.
yeah, perspective.
Correct. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, that's really interesting. It makes me wonder, about getting my eyes checked even more deeper, rather than just getting the correction done, but just actually getting a real vision assessment.
Yeah. Get a binocular vision workup. So that will measure your stereopsis, so your depth perception in at distance and at near. It will measure your ability to fuse objects in different positions. It will measure how much visual stress you can be put under until the fusion breaks apart, and a whole myriad of different things.
Yeah.
You can put prisms in glasses to help line things up. You
Okay.
can train those muscles if they're a little bit weak or underdeveloped. Or if you've got something where the breakdown is more severe, then having some eye muscle surgery can lock things back together again.
Well, let's talk about vision training because you just touched on it,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm assuming obviously the answer is yes. But can vision training? I mean, everyone's different, but can vision training really improve a shooter's timing and ability to read speed, angle, and trajectory?
Categorically, yeah.
Okay.
And again, it was always something that we thought sounded good, but now again, there's more peer-reviewed data which have measured improvement. And again, if you just Google search sports vision training, and I think Dr. Daniel Levy and
Yeah.
Greg Applebaum and Christine Dalton and other very sort of eminent visual scientists have now, with no commercial association, just because they were interested, have found that if certain people go through a sports vision training protocol, they can become better. That improvement in visual potential can then correlate to an improvement on the field. Yeah,
If your
absolutely.
mechanics and technical ability is sound as well, right? Right.
Yeah,
Makes
very,
sense.
very much so. And things like the synaptic strobe glasses, they're statistically proven to help improve reaction time. So if you've got somebody who is shooting like a fast track discipline and they need to or want to shoot something faster, then training with the strobes actually helps.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there is now mounting evidence to support that. But again, as we said, and I am repeating myself, if that person hasn't put the practice in, hasn't got the right technique, all of this stuff is pointless.
Right.
This is the icing on the cake. This is the polish
The
on.
aggregate marginal gain, right?
Correct.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That makes sense. That makes sense. And I know we're going deep into this topic, but I feel like those marginal gains at some point, once you achieve your senior, or, master class or whatever you're trying to do in your competitive journey, once you get to a certain point, you need these marginal gains. This is what differentiates the pros, the master class shooters from all the other classes, right? And so
Yeah.
understanding how you use your eyes, how to improve your eyes, how to maximize your specific situation is critical.
Very, very much so. I mean, sometimes you just get people who are visual anomalies. You get people who are just genetically predisposed to be exceptional at a hand-eye coordination pursuit, and they have all of this visual skill that's just innate. They haven't had to work for it. They didn't know they had it. They just had it naturally. Um,
What do
but
you
there
think
are
that is? What do you think that is, though? I mean, it can't just be chance, right? Or
just having really good parents and having really good grandparents. So I just
genetics,
think
but genetics plays a part.
yeah, I think some
Okay.
people just kind of win a genetic lottery. You get people who are just predisposed to excel in certain sports. You
Mhm.
get, if you look at, I know it's a totally different thing, but you look at strength athletes, you get people who have myostatin inhibitors. You look at somebody like Eddie Hall, who's like world's strongest man. He's got particular physiology, which means that his muscular output is significantly higher than normal, lays down more muscle fibers in different situations, different levels of fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers that most humans can't do. But that's why he's one of the strongest people that's ever lived. You get people like Michael Phelps. What's he got? Size 22 feet and all this kind of stuff. He's almost meant to swim.
Right.
Um, so you get people who are just naturally visually acute.
Mhm.
But my job and the job of other sports optometrists is to try and at least level the playing field and to assess somebody and say, actually, you are exceptional at 6 of these different things. And if we do this, we can at least bring you on par with these other 4. It's to try and drag out as much visual potential as we can.
Interesting. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. So it's like bodybuilders, right? There's folks that are just predisposed, like you're saying, Eddie Hall, and then, but there's folks that can actually build up to that point. And it sounds like you could do that with your eye training as well.
Yeah, very
So
much so.
speaking of that, with your business, and I know you, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you have 2 businesses. You have Edwards Eyewear, which is the eyewear company that you and Ed Solomons run together and
Yeah.
have put together. But then you also have Flint Optometry, where obviously is your practice, where you're working with folks to maximize their abilities. What do you recommend folks to do? Like if they wanted to come see you, do an assessment, you said it's a 2 hour pretty much review. What types of assessments are you doing for most folks? Or just does it depend on the person?
It depends on the person. It depends on the sport. It also depends on the level and what they want to achieve. So there's no point in me going into the absolute sort of cutting edge minutiae on online sports vision training and multiple object tracking if somebody just wants to be slightly better once a month at shooting with their buddies. So my assessment is kind of matched to the desires of the client, if you see what I mean.
Mhm.
Um, I've had a couple of guys who've come over to shoot well, come over. They're shooting at the World Championships at EJ Churchill's this week. So on, where are we? Wednesday, I had a client from France, Australia, and the US. So we get clients in from all over the world pretty frequently. As we said, it's a minimum 2 hour assessment. So it's pretty long, it's pretty in depth. And it's a tailored solution to try to make sure that that person at the end of the assessment has got the information to be visually better than where they were before, just to make sure that we've got the best opportunity of extracting all of that acuity out of them. One of the most fun things that we do is specialist contact lens work. So you can get contacts which are off the shelf, or you can actually tailor make them. So we've got a really cool piece of equipment called a corneal topographer, where we can take a 3D mold, a 3D scan of that eye, and we can custom develop a contact lens to fit all of the parameters.
Oh, wow.
And which is amazing for things like astigmatism and all of those sort of important areas where other regular wear contacts just don't work enough. We've even produced contact lenses to help people with eye dominance problems. So people who need to have an eye controlled by turning it off, we can make a contact lens that's fully occlusive or partially occlusive. So people who don't want patches on their glasses, or people who can't close an eye, we design contact lenses to filter out certain amounts of data, which mean that the eye dominance can be switched or corrected through contacts. So
Wow.
there's all sorts of fun stuff. And,
Is
and
that
each,
the latest in technology now, the contact lens technology? Because it sounds like the industry has evolved quite a bit in sports vision. How have you seen it change over the last 10 years?
um, two different ways. So different and superior methods of analysis. So pieces of software that enable us to have much stronger data processing and more of an in-depth understanding of how somebody performs and identifying the weaknesses, but also crucially, if we've got a client in and psychologically they've absolutely aced the test, sometimes some of the best results we actually have, I don't need to do anything. We can look at that person and say, actually, you're in that 95th percentile globally of everybody you're shooting against, and the data proves it. And then psychologically, they then know that they're performing in the top of their field, and that can be really powerful. You touched on the psychology of shooting glasses, but to know that statistically you are better than most people is a real psychological boost. But more and more companies are looking at basically a bit of one-upmanship against their competitors, trying to say, who can make the best lens for this? Who can make the contact lens that controls what we call higher order aberrations? Who makes a lens that's got more contrast in it? Who makes a spectacle lens where all of these factors are controlled and improved? It's just getting better every year. It's a very exciting field to be in, and there's always new stuff for me to learn. So I'm always trying to improve my knowledge, because I think that, as with all things, that the moment you think that you know everything is the time you realize you actually know nothing at all.
Right, right. I know the World English is going on right now. Are you going to be participating in it or going to it or?
No, it's family time at the moment, and we're also getting a brand new delivery of our new glasses in from Japan anytime soon. So me and Mr. Solomons are going to be spending a good few long days together going through stock and getting these out to our sort of dealer network and people who've put sort of pre-orders in on our website. So we've got a lot of work to do ahead of us over this next week. But I'm going to be I've got lots and lots of clients who are shooting it. I've had lots of messages today from people who've had an interesting experience, because it's one of Steve Lovett's courses, so it's going to be fantastic. It's going to catch a few people out.
Yeah,
So
I've been looking at the scores a little bit already to
yeah,
start off with. I mean, it's early still, but it's been interesting. It's interesting to see how things play out over the
I'm
next couple of
excited to see
days.
how people shoot with it. It's going to be a
Yeah.
fantastic days. Yeah.
Well, I got to say, and again, I'm not sponsored by you or paid to say this. I really do enjoy my glasses, so thank you for that. In
You're very
fact, I
welcome.
think that's how I initially kind of met you, is by purchasing that. Actually, no, I bought your visual kit years ago, I think, and started using that a little bit. And I'm going to continue to kind of focus on my eye game, if you will. definitely go get an assessment because that's something that I think I need to do. I haven't done that in a while, and I definitely haven't changed my prescription in over 2 years. So that's another thing I need to focus on. But I sincerely appreciate your time, Ed. This has been super informative, super insightful. I think there's so much more we probably could cover, but
Oh, there's
I think we've scratched the surface on a good level here. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise and for your time today.
no. Thanks for inviting me onto the platform, and I think I'm always open to discuss as many things as I can with the viewers. So if anybody does have any specific questions that they want me to expand on, or anything they want me to talk privately, drop a comment down in the section below, message me on, through ed@ed-lyons.com. You can go on my website, you can WhatsApp me. I'm really responsive. Obviously, with time differences, there might be a little bit of a delay, but I'm always interested in talking to people, to try and help them to, get the best out of their eyesight and the best out of their sport, really.
No, you've been absolutely great, man. I've appreciated your responsiveness to me as well. Just no, we didn't even know each other, but you've always returned my emails and gotten back to me very quickly. And I'll definitely make sure that I put some of your contact information and your links down in the comments. So if anyone has any questions for Ed, feel free to reach out to him. He's a good dude and very knowledgeable, as you could see. So really appreciate your time, Ed.
You're very welcome.
Thanks.